So, you know, in the past, we've had what I call sort of this donut hole problem where we talk about the fancy new tools, and it also have a very beginner-oriented tutorial, and everything in the beginning would kind of fall into what I would think of a donut hole, maybe what our DES friends would call a black hole. So instead, we thought that we'd give a series of talks and sort of quickly be a survey over everything. And I know it's going to go a little fast, but that's okay. The idea here is to plant seeds that you can remember and maybe Google later, even if you don't get the whole gestalt of everything. So if you do want the whole beginner's talk, it's on YouTube here. So this one's going to be a fast-paced, sort of high throughput kind of talk, covering all the tools, or as I like to say it, and don't ignore that asterisk and what it might mean there. So every Condor tool in 30 minutes. And as I was looking through this, I found that there's about 60 Condor tools. So hang on to your seats. But they do fall into several categories. So I'm not going to walk through all these categories here, but there's kind of an organization here, and we'll go through in that order. So the first sort of commands that I want to talk about are commands for managing jobs. Now, I'm glad Marone's not here, but if you had to learn one command, or if you had to teach someone one command, and you only got one command about Condor, what do you think that would be? I love it. Absolutely not planted at all. So Condor submit. Hopefully everyone knows what Condor submit does. It looks like this. And what actually goes on behind the hood is the Condor submit tool talks to the SCED and gets back a class add, the Condor submit language, what TJ called the JCL, for those of you who know what IBM is. We'll translate the submit file language into class adds and send that off to the SCED. Now, sometimes you might want to know, well, what exactly does that class add look like? Or maybe more to the point, what does this translation look like when we go from the submit language to the class add language? Because as TJ showed, there can be variable, there can be expansion, there can be kind of a bunch of things going on there. It's not necessarily a one-to-one and onto translation between submit and class adds, even though it kind of looks like that. So to do that, you can use the dry run command. The dry run is a very handy command. You're trying to debug what exactly you did wrong in your submit file. And it's just a dry run, and it takes the name of an output file. If you are a Mountain Dew drinking Linux hacker, you might want to give dev standard out as your file name. And you'll get an output like this. This is, of course, shortened with it on the screen. So I think the dry run is a very handy thing to do, and probably not often as used as it could be by administrators who are debugging things. As someone asked earlier, another common thing that I think is not used as often as it could be is Condor submit-I for interactive. And that will give you an interactive shell on some random machine in your pool. If you don't want some random machine, if you want some specific machine, you could also pass it a submit file that has requirements and file transfer and all that stuff in it. And this is, again, a super handy command for debugging what might happen if your job fails on a worker node, but doesn't fail when run by hand or locally. Yet another Condor submit command line option that I think few people know about is batch name. Who here has used batch name? TJ, put your hand down. Who here who doesn't work on my floor has used batch name? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. A lot of times, hopefully, the whole idea behind high throughput is that we're submitting more than one job, and these jobs are all, working together on something. And batch name can give a name to a bunch of jobs, maybe not all submitted at the same time. And if you do batch name, it shows up in the Condor Q output with this name. This is test tube 7 that I'm working on. So that's yet another Condor submit option. By default, when you have file transfer on, the file transfers are transferred when the job starts from wherever you specified them. Maybe those input files are being edited, maybe by you, maybe by forces antagonistic towards you. So you might want to submit the files, the input files, as they exist at submit time, not at job start time. And that's what Condor submit-spool does. A related command to Condor submit-spool is Condur submit can also talk to a remote SCED, given that you have access to write to that. And remote implies spool. And when spool is on, either direct or via remote, what happens when the job exits? Does anyone know? You did a remote command. The input files were sent from your laptop maybe to where the SCED is running. Your output files come back. There's no path to get it back to your laptop. So where do the files go? Where do the files go? What's that? The spool directory, that's right. If you do a spooled submit, either remote or via spool, they end up in the SCED where they hang out for a while until you pick them up with the Condor transfer data command, which will take the files out of spool and the sandbox out of spool and put them into your current directory. Now there's about 1 million options, as TJ didn't even get a chance to cover in 25 minutes. So look at the Condor manual under the submit man page for all the options to Condor submit, because I'm sure not going to cover them all. A few one-liners though. We talked about the Condor submit file. Doesn't have to come from a file. It can read from standard in. This can be very handy if you are writing a Condor submit wrapper script, as I've heard, I think 3 people do today. And you don't even have to read from standard input. You can pass the arguments along on the command line like that. Now, right about now, I know what you're thinking. Is this the talk that should be titled "Every Condor Tool in 30 Minutes"? Because I'm like halfway in and I've covered one tool? Or is it every Condor tool in 30 minutes each? Not to worry, Condor submit's a tricky one. We're going to go a little faster from here on out. Condor submit DAG is how you submit DAGs. That's Cole's favorite command. Don't make the mistake that I make every single time. Condor submit only takes single job submit files or single cluster submit files. If you want to submit a DAG, you have to use Condor submit DAG. Condor submit will not submit a DAG. Condor submit DAG will not submit a submit file. Perhaps it should. There's only one command option of interest to Condor submit DAG, and that's force. So if you're resubmitting a DAG and you don't want to restart, make sure to use the force command. That's no submit. I only got 25 minutes here. So we said that we all agreed that if you know one command, it should be Condor submit. If you only know 2 commands, what should the second command be? I will give you a hint. Marone would say I have the order backwards. Not much to say about Condor remove. Like most of the options to Condor remove, the explicit job with cluster.proc, you can remove all the procs in a cluster, or all your jobs with Condor username or someone else's if you have the appropriate permissions. Like many tools, Condor remove takes a constraint or -const, where you can give it a class add expression, which will only remove those. This is very powerful. If you're an administrator and want to make that step up from beginning administrator to intermediate administrator, I suggest you learn how to do this. It's very powerful. And let's say you want to make that step up and you're not quite sure that you got the expression right, like me. Using Condor Q with that same expression will give you some confidence that you're getting the right jobs. Condor Q will show you what jobs match that expression so you can be sure. One option to Condor RM that I think isn't used often enough, that should probably always be used, is the reason option. How many here have removed someone else's jobs? Intentionally. Okay. There is an option to Condor RM -reason, which puts an attribute into the job that goes into the history file with this string in it. I strongly encourage you to always use it, because you're going to forget why you removed the job, or you want to give some notice to the user that they were misbehaving. Please always use a reason for Condor RM. It will save you hours of headache later, I can assure you. Now, all of the act on job commands that we're going to cover have these same kind of options. I won't go into them in details. You can remove or act on them with these same kind of constraints. Now, there's 7 more sort of act on job commands, but they all kind of cluster together. There's three sets of twins and the oddball. So let's start with the first set of twins, Condor suspend and resume. This isn't used as often as other commands, but when you need it, you really need it. When Condor suspend is run, a formerly running job is suspended. This means it's stopped, like you hit it with sig stop or Control Z. It's still on the machine. It's still accumulating Condor usage, but it's not running. It's not accumulating any CPU or network usage. Sometimes in an emergency, admins find this very useful. For example, hypothetically speaking, if your institution switches on and off chilled water twice a year and your cooling completely fails, you may want to very quickly and very effectively reduce the power that your cluster uses. You could Condor suspend all the jobs in your cluster for maybe a short period of time. Your power usage would go down substantially. And when, hopefully in a few minutes, no, maybe longer time, the power is restored, you could Condor resume everything and have them running back again. So that's the first of our twins. The second of our twins, which I think are used more often, are Condor hold and release. Unlike suspend and resume, when a job, formerly running job, is held, it's evicted and removed from the EP and placed in a held state where it can't be restarted until such time as you run Condor release. Again, these take the same options as always. And just like Condor RM, it takes a reason. And again, I would very strongly encourage admins to always use the -reason option when you put someone else's jobs on hold. Even if you're putting your own jobs on hold, if you have the memory of a Greg, you'll want to use this reason to remind you why you did this. So the third of our twins is Condor Q, and hopefully everyone here has used that. Again, takes the same kind of options and some more that our three sets of twins do. And one of the more interesting and I think fun options of Condor Q is -better, which stands for better analyze, which does some sort of simulation on your job and all the machines, all the slots in the pool to determine why your job doesn't match. So if you have a job that's idle and you think it's idle because it's not matching, Condor Q-better may be the first place to go. Another thing people don't know about is Condor Q can also be used to query remote scheddies with the -name option for scheddies that are in your pool, or -name -pool for scheddies that are in some other pool. Again, assuming that you have permission to do so. Condor Q can also read from a file if you have a job ad in the file, which might be handy if you ran the -dry run option. Or even better yet, let's say you really want to run Condor Q-better to figure out why something isn't matching, but you want to know, why isn't it matching this one slot? I got a pretty good idea in my head that this job should match this slot. So if you generate a job ad file, maybe with Condor Q-L or dry run or something, and a slot ad file with Condor status, this can tell you, you can constrain Condor Q-better to only match this job in this slot. And even better, you can then edit the job or the slot file to figure out, well, if I change this, would it match, or why isn't it matching? So this is a very powerful tool. And for you advanced administrators whose users come to you and say, why isn't my job matching? I strongly recommend this. And of course, a corollary to Condor Q is Condor Watch Q. We talked about this twice before, so I'm not gonna cover that. And finally, in the Condor Q family, there's Condor Q Edit, which can make changes to a job that has already been submitted. Now, a interesting thing about Condor Q Edit is it only makes changes in the scheddies copy of the ad. Once the job is running, that doesn't propagate onto the EP. Now, quoting is tricky. Remember, we've got both shell and class ad quoting. So you notice in the first one here, we have single quotes and double quotes. One way to get around that, again, an uncommonly used option that probably should use more, is Condor Q-edit or edits, which takes a file. So you get around the shell quoting. Notice you still need the class ad quoting. So be careful here. That's what I want to say about Condor Q and its pair Condor history. Does anyone know what a problem, maybe the biggest problem with Condor history is? Don't worry, I'll wait. And wait. And wait. That's right, Condor history can be slow. And it's slow for two reasons. One, there's rather a lot of information about each job in the history file. And two, there are usually an enormous number of jobs. So To solve the second problem first, we can say -match1, say, oh, only match the first job. So once you hit it, it doesn't go all the way through searching all the thousands or 10,000, however many jobs there might be. Or, counter history takes it forwards and backwards. So if you have a pretty good idea that your job was in the first part or the last part of the history file, this can help you speed up a bit. Now, another trick is counter history takes a user log option, which we now call the event log. And this solves both problems at the same time, because the event log usually only has events for your jobs, not everyone, and it has fewer attributes for each job, which means you may not get the full set of things you're interested in, but it will go a gazillion times faster. Counter user log, my new favorite tool, does a similar kind of thing. But the real solution to slow history is use a real database. And the counter add stash tool, which I think Jason talked about earlier, can copy a history file or the job ads in a history file into Elasticsearch, where you can use a real, if clunky, JSON query mechanism. And if you're running a large pool, you're doing lots of queries, we strongly recommend doing this sort of thing. So that's our first category of commands. Any questions? Andrew.
Yeah, with the user log file,
Yep.
you said it takes the job log. So that's, the in your submit file log equals something.log. That's what you're referring to?
Yes. So yeah, that's the log equals something, or it could also be the global event log, or it could also be the one that Dagman creates in the nodes.log file. Yeah, James.
Yeah, I had either forgotten or didn't know about Condor transfer data. Does that show you the location of checkpoint data in the spool for still running jobs?
I don't think so, but I'd have to check. So we'll get there. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about commands that work on already running jobs. And when I say already running, in most universes, in particular, these don't work generally on the grid ones. We've got counter SSH to job, which is a fantastic command when it works. There is no end of magic required for this tool to work. So occasionally it doesn't work. And it is the basis of counter submit-I. There's a bunch of really interesting options to counter SSH to job, including -X to propagate the X protocol. So if you're using like the MATLAB toolbox, that will work. Pretty cool. And because counter SSH to job sits on top of SSH, all of the SSH options can be passed via the -SSH. So if you really want to show off, we can do SCP to job on top of counter SSH to job. And I'm not going to ask you to memorize this. Oh yeah, a light bulb just went on over at Mo's head. I'm not going to ask you to memorize the syntax. The slides will be up, and rsync will work too in this way. Those are maybe a little bit tricky, a little bit esoteric, a little bit moat-worthy. A simpler way might be Condor tail. Condor tail takes a job ID and copies the last k byte of data from standard output or standard error if you give the -standard error option, or some random file. A lot of people don't know about this. This works generally everywhere. And this is a very good way to get a peek into my job's been running for an hour. It's over there. How's it doing? Condor tail, very handy for seeing, getting kind of what's going on my job. Similar to Condor transfer data is Condor evicted files. This is very handy for James checkpoints files. So given the list command and a job ID, it will list all the files that are stored in the spool directory. This allows for inspection and fetching of files, and it also works with checkpoints. That's very handy. If you want to generate one of those, you could Condor vacate your job, which will take a running job and evict it. It won't hold it, it will evict it, send it back to the idle state. Maybe you know that your job is on a machine that is in trouble and you want to get it off. Condor vacate job, very handy. The next command that works on running jobs is chirp. And chirp is the only command that must run inside the job and on the EP. We also have nice Python bindings. So if you are a kind of person who argues about what Pythonic means, we can run chirp commands from pure Python. These commands run on the EP when the job is running. And there are many subcommands of chirp, but the most important ones include getting job add attributes from the AP, very handy, and setting job add attributes. So you can use the job add as kind of like a blackboard, if you will. Just like with Condor QEdit, be careful with quoting, because when you're using the shell versions of these, we got shell quoting going on and class add. There's also a chirp command to append to the user log. Again, super handy for debugging. So if you've got a job that takes, I don't know, 100 hours, maybe you want to ulog something. I've made it 10%, I've made it 20%, and you can get kind of a better feeling for what's going on. Then there's Condor wait, which blocks until reads event file and blocks until that job exits, or maybe all the jobs in the event file. This is usually used for building up bigger scripts and doing things like that. So that's it for commands for jobs that are running. Our next set is commands for EPs and other Condor services. Maybe this is the most important command you should know, Condor off. Condor off can take the name of the daemon to turn off, or turns off everyone with Condor off except the master. If you really want everything and lose our point of presence, the Condor master, you need to explicitly ask for Condor off -master. Of course, we've got the dual of that, Condor on. Same thing applies there. Again, because Condor on talks to the master, it doesn't actually start the master. And there's no way to do that other than to either tell systemd to do it, or your service manager, or to run it yourself. Now, if you're doing Condor off and on, a lot of times, maybe you really want Condor restart. Again, a very handy admin command for those of you who know what you're doing. Now, a very useful command, once you have P slots enabled, is Condor drain. Who here uses Condor drain? Outstanding. Who here uses Condor drain by hand? Yeah, that's sort of unfortunate. We'd like to get to a point where we're doing this automatically, but until such time, Condor drain will tell a machine not to accept any more new jobs until such time as you cancel it with a cancel command, or it restarts. We've recently added a Condor now command, again, for running, immediately replacing a running job and machine with what you might think is a higher priority job. And just like there's Condor vacate job, which takes a job ID, there's also Condor vacate, which takes the name of a machine, which tells Condor to immediately evict all the jobs on that machine. And all the jobs, they don't get held, they go to idle to run somewhere else. Maybe you might want to do this if you're shutting down the machine, or if you know it's bad, or if you're just generally having a bad day and you need to shut down a machine. What is Condor known for? Knobs. Oh, we got knobs. We've all seen how to use Condor config val, I think. Condor config val can take the name of a knob and it'll tell you its value. A subcommand of Condor config val I think not a lot of people know about is -summary. And this will print out a diff of all the config knobs that you have changed that are different from the defaults. Very, very handy. Who here has used Condor config? Who here who doesn't work on my floor has used Condor config val -summary? Yeah, next year I want to see more hands up, because this is incredibly useful. Incredibly useful. We also have -verbose, which will tell you a little bit of a help string, or the line number that config knob is set on. And of course, once you change knobs, Condor reconfig is super handy for, Condor reconfig will tell Condor to reread its config file. A lot of our knobs sort of depend on each other, and we don't want Condor to, in general, see a change to a knob immediately. We kind of want a transaction, if you will. And Condor reconfig will do that. Condor status, we should all know about. Who here does this a lot? Please don't. It like usually works. Did you get the regular expression right? Are you sure? Did you anchor it? Oh, you didn't anchor it. Yeah, right. Did you remember the class adds are case insensitive? Yeah, and it can be slow. So rather, we encourage you to run something like this, which will only show that one attribute, and it evaluates by default, which may or may not be what you want. And usually for literals, just a naked AF is good enough. But there are :R and :LR options to give the quoted and the full sort of -L format. Now, Condor status isn't just for ads or slot ads. There's also all the metadata about submitters and SCEDVs and the master, which can be queried from the collector with Condor status. So moving on, we've got commands for debugging and testing the services proper. Probably the command that has the least amount of problems, Condor version. Pretty straightforward. We could do better even with this. Another command for debugging, which is super useful, is the class add eval command. The class add, now, those of you who drink too much Mountain Dew probably write very elaborate class add expressions, which means they needed to be debugged. And class add eval is a command line tool where you give it a class add and an expression, and it evaluates that expression in the context of that class add. This is super helpful if you're someone like me who can never remember if the regular expression function is spelled with a P or not. Is it regex or regeps? I can never remember. Yeah, well, that's my next problem. The Condor who command will show you what's running on your EP. Again, I think this is a very underutilized command. Condor who, you run it on your EP, and it'll show you all the jobs that it knows about, their job IDs, how long they've been running, and their PID, not that you should ever kill them. More of an advanced command is Condor top. I wouldn't recommend that you run this yourself. We might ask you to run Condor top and send us the output of this incredibly esoteric, confusing output. It's like top, but it prints out Condor internal function names, and we don't really expect people to understand it, but just know that it's there in case something is misbehaving. Condor debug logs can be fetched remotely with Condor fetch log, and Condor transforms, SCEDV transforms, can be debugged with the Condor transform add rules. Anyone know what a SCEDV transform is? Yeah, we have a whole talk on that subject. And then there are 3 commands to query aspects of the machine. Condor starter-class add is what the start view runs on startup, and it'll print out attributes of the machine, like whether or not we've got certain Condor features. If we talked about this earlier, the Condor GPU discovery, if you pass the -extra flag, we'll give you a little bit more information about what Condor thinks it knows about the GPUs, which may or may not be what you think Condor should know about GPUs. Same with power savings for those of you the green computing stuff. Moving on, we have just a couple of commands for submitters. My favorite command, Condor user prio, will tell you about the pool-wide priorities and the pool-wide total usage of all your submitters since the beginning of time, where at the beginning of time is when your negotiators start running. This is very, very handy. And we've got a whole talk about those, which I won't go into here, but if you're really curious about how to set priorities and fair share and unfair share and group quotas, that's a great talk. Recently, we added a ceiling option for each submitter. So you can say, well, independent of fair share, I want this user to use no more than, say, 100 cores. So people find this very helpful for onboarding users. They're brand new users. We, trust but verify. We'll start them out with a low ceiling. They can prove to us they know what they're doing, and then we can raise their ceiling later. Condor user prio can do that. And if we have a ceiling, shouldn't we have a floor? So in the last series, we've added a floor, which is, again, the corollary of ceiling, which means that Condor, again, despite what your priority is, will try to ensure that each user gets at least that many cores by giving a preliminary round where everyone gets up to their floor. Obviously, not a hard guarantee. It's best effort, but first, Condor tries to get everyone up to their floor, and then it does the fair share. One of our newest commands that may not be in a Condor version you have is Condor queue users. which has this great ability to prevent some, oh, is that a typo? This may not be installed on the Sketty that Todd is running, which gives you the ability, gives the administrator the ability to prevent some arbitrary user from submitting commands. And with no options, it'll show the usage since the beginning of time, where the beginning of time is the start of Sketty. And also there's a corresponding enable, so you could also do -enable Tannenbaugh. I don't know why you ever want to do that. Finally, there's one new command, our one ring, our one command to rule them all. And this is a bit experimental. We call it the HTCondor CLI, or the noun verb tool, because like all the new hotness, Kubernetes or Docker or what have you, it's one command that wraps all the functionality into a two-level hierarchy. The first is the noun, the second is the verb. This is a fresh start, so it's written in Python, as TJ, I think, said earlier. You can look at the Python and make snide comments about how Pythonic or not. It is extensible, so you can add new nouns, which might be interesting. And we're really looking for feedback on this. So this is kind of a new tool. We think it's the right way to go. It's a way for us to move forward without worrying about backward compatibility. And that is all the Condor tools in 30 minutes or less.